I helped my father grow his company into a $125 million enterprise. But at a staff award night, he whispered, "Don't let her get too big-headed, she's replaceable." The next day, he cleaned out my office while I was in a meeting, leaving a note, "We'll manage without you." But while he was gloating, the investors were. "You're getting a little too comfortable in the spotlight," my dad muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, right after I'd accepted an award for leading our company's most successful year. I smiled for the cameras, trying to pretend the words didn't slice through me. The next day, he had my office cleared out while I was in a meeting. No warning. No conversation. Just a note that said, "We'll manage without you." My dad, Alaric Sutton, was a hard man even before success got its claws into him. Stubborn to a fault. Calculated. Efficient in everything except emotion. When I was a kid, our conversations were mostly logistical. He wasn't the kind of father who asked about crushes or hobbies, he asked about test scores and practical ambitions. "Feelings are for poets," he used to say. "You can't deposit emotion into a bank account." When my parents divorced during my sophomore year of college, it wasn't even dramatic. My mom packed up quietly and moved back to her hometown in Ohio. I stayed with Dad. Partly because he needed help with the business, partly because I wasn't close with my mom, and mostly because I thought, stupidly, that being useful would keep me close to him. That business, Sutton Logistics, was nothing more than a glorified dispatch office back then. A few trucks. One contract with a regional grocery chain. I majored in marketing and supply chain management and turned down a job offer in Chicago to help him scale it. I thought it would be our thing. And at first, it was. He let me build out our digital systems from the ground up. I hired talent, made connections, secured clients, and pitched investors. In meetings, people assumed I was the one running things. I'd laugh and say, "No, I just work for the guy." But deep down, I thought we were equals. Partners, even. That illusion lasted until McLaren Holdings entered the picture. They were a big Boston-based group looking to invest in scalable logistics operations in the Midwest. When they came knocking, it was because of a white paper I'd authored on sustainable delivery models. I presented our pitch, walked them through our analytics, outlined our expansion strategy. They were impressed. But what really sold them? The confidence they had in my leadership. That's when Dad started getting strange. He'd cut me off in meetings to restate things I'd just said. Started making subtle jokes about how kids these days have big egos. Reassigned 2 of my major accounts to a guy we'd only just hired, with no explanation. I confronted him once, cautiously, and he just smirked. "You've got to learn to share power, Mireille. Don't get too comfortable." I ignored the red flags. That's what you do when it's family, right? You excuse things that would be deal breakers with anyone else. I told myself he was just stressed. That he didn't mean it. Then came the gala. It was our annual staff awards night. I'd just finished giving a speech, one I'd spent 2 weeks writing, after being recognized for our best performing quarter in company history. The whole room stood for me. My team cheered. I was glowing. I'd never felt more validated. My father stood beside me, his arm around my shoulder. The photographer was lining up a group photo. And then, right as the camera clicked, he leaned in and said, "Don't let her get too big-headed. She's replaceable." I actually laughed. Thought maybe I'd misheard. But the tightness in his jaw told me I hadn't. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I had a meeting with McLaren's team. It ran long, close to 2 hours. When I returned to my office, my keycard didn't work. I thought it was a glitch. Then I saw 2 interns standing awkwardly by the door with a cardboard box. My nameplate was gone. My office, cleaned out. Even the small framed picture of my dog was missing. Inside, on my cleared desk, was a yellow sticky note that read, "We'll manage without you." No phone call. No meeting. No HR process. Just, exiled. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I drove home in complete silence, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a celebration and drank it straight from the bottle, still in my work clothes. Then I opened my laptop. They'd forgotten one thing. I had access to everything. Every document. Every contract. Every digital footprint of my involvement in making that company what it was. I didn't want revenge, I wanted acknowledgement. But I wasn't going to let him spin a narrative that erased me. I logged into the investor portal and sent a detailed packet to McLaren's senior leadership. Data, metrics, documentation of every innovation I spearheaded. I was calm. Surgical. I ended the email with a single line: I believe you should know who has been building what you invested in. By the next morning, I had 7 voicemails from Boston. I listened to the voicemails with shaking hands. Marianne Langley, one of McLaren's lead analysts, had left 3 of them. Each more urgent than the last. The first was polite, professional. Hi Mary, this is Marianne. We received your message and the attached materials. I'd love to schedule a call as soon as you're available. The second one, left 3 hours later, was more pointed. Mary. It's Marianne again. Please call me back. The board is extremely interested in what you sent. We're reviewing everything now. And then, the last one, timestamped just past midnight. Mire, I don't know what's going on over there, but we need to talk. We had no idea you were gone. There was no mistaking the concern in her voice. No disguising the disbelief. I called her the next morning. She picked up immediately. Mire, what the heck happened? She asked without any preamble. I gave her the short version. I was fired. No notice. No conversation. Just walked out of my own office like a stranger. A pause. Your father said you resigned, she said carefully. Yeah, I said. He lies. That was the end of polite conversation. She asked for a full timeline. I gave it. She asked for records, emails, memos, anything that proved my work. I had all of it. I'd built the damn infrastructure. The CRM system ran on a server I personally designed with a local contractor in Minnetonka. The product development roadmap? My name was on every draft. There were receipts. Hundreds of them. She didn't need convincing. Can I share this with the board? She asked. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Yes. Share it with everyone. Things moved fast after that. McLaren wasn't just an investor, they were a majority stakeholder. They hadn't fully exercised that power because they trusted my father. Or rather, they thought they were trusting the Sutton family brand, him and me. Now, with only half that equation left, they were rethinking everything. The day after our call, Marianne flew out to Minneapolis with 2 colleagues. They wanted to meet face to face. I met them at a cafe in Northeast, the Bachelor Farmer Cafe, just off Washington Avenue. It was quiet, tucked away enough to talk openly. We sat in a back corner, nursing coffees and picking at pastries none of us had much appetite for. They didn't waste time. We think your father made a serious mistake, Marianne said. The board agrees. I stayed silent. We believe you were the strategic lead on most of the growth areas we're invested in. Is that correct? I nodded. Yes. And you're no longer with the company? No, a beat. How would you feel about coming back? One of her colleagues asked. Not to Sutton Logistics. But something parallel. Something new. I looked at him. Go on. We're considering a restructure. We want to separate our investment from the family business model. We'd like to build a new division, focused on sustainability, modernization, AI-driven delivery. You'd have full control. You'd hire the team. Set the roadmap. I was stunned. Why me? I asked. Because, Marianne said, your father built a company. But you built the future of it. And we'd rather bet on the future. I didn't say yes right away. It took a week. Spent most of it in my apartment, wandering from room to room, staring at my half-packed boxes, things I had meant to move into a bigger place once my promotion came through. Instead, I was unemployed. Technically. The press hadn't picked up on anything yet, but inside the industry, word spread quickly. People I hadn't heard from in years reached out with cautious curiosity. Are you okay? What happened? Is it true? I answered none of them. I was too busy reviewing the pitch McLaren sent me for the new division. Their budget. Their vision. Their timeline. It wasn't Sutton Logistics 2.0. It was something smarter. Leaner. Mine. One night, around 10 p.m., I drove past the Sutton Logistics headquarters. The lights were still on in my old wing. I knew that layout by heart, the way the late light glinted off the glass panels, the odd humming sound the HVAC made when it kicked in after hours. I parked across the street and watched for a while. The parking lot was nearly empty. Except for one car. His car. I wondered if he was in my old office, sitting in my chair, wondering if I'd retaliate. If I'd embarrass him. If I'd talk. I didn't care. It wasn't about that anymore. I eventually said yes to McLaren. I signed on as the CEO of a new firm under their banner, called LINQ Freight Technologies. Clean branding. Future forward. We leased office space in St. Paul to start, in a building with solar panels and zero industrial baggage. I hired people I trusted. Some of them were from Sutton. Quiet exits, polite farewells. Others were fresh, new grads, innovators, people who didn't carry old loyalties. My first act as CEO was writing a mission statement. A real one. Not corporate fluff. I sat in the new office, bare walls around me, and typed, "We build systems designed to include the people who build them. Innovation is only worth pursuing if it rewards the minds that make it possible." And then I hit print. I taped it to the glass wall. Across town, my father was probably pacing, wondering what had gone wrong. But I knew the truth. What went wrong was never the business. What went wrong was thinking loyalty and love were the same thing as power and control. I didn't expect the first public crack to show so soon. A former VP from Sutton Logistics, Onik Gohill, someone who used to head our Pacific operations, resigned and published a cryptic post on LinkedIn 2 weeks after I officially joined LINQ. It read, "Integrity is built over decades and destroyed in moments. Moving forward with purpose." #new beginnings. No mention of my father. No mention of Sutton. But the timing spoke volumes, especially to those in the logistics world. Within 24 hours, I received 6 emails from former colleagues. 3 of them asked if we were hiring. We were. What McLaren had created was more than just a safety net for me, it was a launching pad. LYNQ moved fast. I knew the cracks in the traditional logistics model. Knew how to avoid them. Knew where money got wasted and where tech could fill the gaps. And more than anything, I knew how to build a team that didn't fear being outshone. There were moments, though, where I still couldn't believe it. I'd walk into our modest office, just a floor in a converted mill building in St. Paul's Lower Town, and pause at the reception desk. My name on the letterhead. People who looked me in the eye when they spoke. A culture where ideas weren't hoarded, they were shared, refined, celebrated. It felt unreal. Because for so long, I thought you had to claw your way to the top by proving you were just useful enough to be kept, but not threatening enough to be eliminated. Back at Sutton Logistics, things weren't going as smoothly. McLaren never went public with the details of my departure, but they made subtle moves that couldn't be ignored. They withheld approval on 2 strategic expansions. Froze funding on an automation rollout that had been my pet project. Shifted their votes in board meetings to abstain from endorsing my father's quarterly strategies. The press started asking questions. One Minneapolis business journal ran a headline, quiet chaos at Sutton Logistics. Sources say senior talent is jumping ship. My father denied it all. Of course he did. I heard through an ex-coworker that he told the remaining team, she'll be back. She needs me. That's when it hit me, he didn't think he'd lost me. He thought I was pulling some sort of tantrum. That this was a phase. Eventually I'd come crawling back, asking to be let in again. But I wasn't a daughter asking for love anymore. I was a professional reclaiming space. A month later, McLaren invited me to Boston. They wanted me to present the LINQ vision at their semi-annual investor roundtable. It wasn't a high-profile event, more internal, mostly strategy briefings and portfolio updates. But Sutton would be there. Which meant so would my father. I debated saying no. But I went. I stood at a podium in a hotel conference room overlooking the Charles River and walked the McLaren board through our roadmap: modular AI routing, eco-driven fleet partnerships, decentralized freight hubs, predictive resourcing for rural regions. It wasn't flashy. It was focused. At the end of the presentation, there was silence. And then applause. Actual applause. I caught a glimpse of my father from the corner of my eye, arms crossed, lips thin. He didn't clap. He didn't even look at me. Marianne leaned over afterward and said quietly, I think the message landed. The next day, I got a call from my cousin Jory, someone who still worked the admin side at Sutton. She sounded uncomfortable, almost guilty. Your dad had a meltdown in the boardroom this morning, she said, whispering. I didn't respond. He's saying you're trying to poach staff, destabilize operations, stuff like that. But no one's buying it. Everyone knows what really happened. I didn't enjoy hearing it. I didn't gloat. All I felt was tired. Because of all the harm he did to me, I still remembered the man who used to take me on long drives through the industrial zones of Minneapolis, showing me trucks and warehouses like they were cathedrals. I remembered a father who once said, you see that route to Duluth? That's our future. He was wrong. It wasn't the route that was the future. It was me. I started receiving invitations to panels and interviews. Female CEO disrupting Midwestern freight industry. From betrayal to breakthrough. People love a narrative. I was careful with what I said. Never mentioned his name. Never told the full story. I didn't need to. Those who knew, already knew. But word travels. One evening, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, perfectly printed. Inside, a single line. You'll regret what you've done. No signature. But I knew the handwriting. Knew it like I knew my own. I burned it in my kitchen sink. 3 weeks after the investor roundtable, things started unraveling faster than even I expected. It started with a small but sharp op-ed in the Star Tribune. The headline read, When Founders Forget Their Builders, A Lesson in Corporate Blindness. The article didn't name names, but the references were unmistakable. A Midwestern logistics firm, once lauded for its progressive leadership and innovation in sustainable freight solutions, has quietly parted ways with its visionary COO, replaced without announcement, explanation, or succession plan. My phone lit up for 2 days. Every person in the industry with a LinkedIn account either messaged me or shared the article with a caption like, Remind you of anyone? Or, this feels familiar. The piece painted a picture of a company at odds with itself. A powerful founder growing isolated from his own team, increasingly reliant on outdated models. It described an invisible architect who had set the standard for a modern logistics transformation and was now notably absent. Again, no names. No direct callouts. But you didn't need names. If you worked in or near logistics in Minnesota, or frankly, anywhere in the upper Midwest, you knew exactly who it was about. I didn't comment publicly. I didn't even repost it. But I did get a call from Marianne 2 days later. Alaric demanded a rebuttal, she said. Wants to issue a statement through McLaren saying he remains the visionary leader of Sutton and that he was solely responsible for the company's direction over the last decade. I let out a dry laugh. Of course he does. She sighed. We're not doing it. The board's not interested in sanitizing his ego. Then what are you doing? Another pause. This one felt heavier. We're discussing whether to replace him. My stomach tightened. Replace him? It's not official, she added quickly. But we've seen the numbers. Growth has slowed. Talent is bleeding out. And frankly, the trust is gone. I didn't know how to respond to that. For years, I thought he was untouchable. Not because he was brilliant, but because he had just enough power and history with the company to make people think twice about challenging him. But McLaren wasn't afraid anymore. Because they had a new horse in the race. Meanwhile, at LINQ, we were growing faster than anticipated. We landed our first government pilot contract for rural freight reoptimization, servicing areas in northern Wisconsin and Michigan that had been overlooked by the larger carriers. We'd use electric vehicles and AI-coordinated microdepots. It was a bold move, and a smart one. The client? The same Department of Transportation office that had once passed on Sutton's bid 2 years ago. A former coworker texted me, he's going to see this in the papers and lose his mind. But I didn't care anymore. This wasn't about beating him. This wasn't a revenge tour. I'd stopped thinking about my father as a father. And I had no interest in thinking about him as a competitor. That would imply we were still playing the same game. We weren't. I was in the future. He was trying to rewrite the past. Then came the board meeting. The one I wasn't invited to, but knew was coming. Jory called again, late at night, whispering from what sounded like a bathroom stall. It's happening, she said. What is? The vote. McLaren just arrived. Alaric looks pale. I waited. They're doing it now. I think they're removing him. I closed my eyes, letting her words hang in the air. There was no joy in it. No relief. Only a quiet, surreal kind of closure. 2 hours later, she texted again. He's out. The news leaked the next day. It was reported in the business section as a strategic shift in executive leadership. The article mentioned internal misalignments, operational redundancy, and emerging leadership models, all the classic buzzwords. But insiders knew. Everyone knew. For the first time, the name Alaric Sutton wasn't in the founder and CEO line of the company's official press release. He was stepping back. Focusing on advisory roles. I knew the language well. He was being shelved. But here's the part that surprised me. The phone call came 3 days later. Unknown number. Boston area code. I let it go to voicemail. The message was brief. This is Alaric. I'd like to speak. That's all. No apology. No emotion. Just speak. I listened to it 5 times. Not because I missed him. But because I couldn't tell what tone he was trying to strike. Regret? Resentment? Damage control? I didn't return the call. Not immediately. I went back to work. LYNQ was expanding into Illinois. We'd just hired a new regional head and secured a tech partnership with a university in Madison. I was preparing for a conference in Toronto. But the voicemail sat on my phone like a splinter. I knew he wouldn't call again. He never repeated himself when he didn't have to. I waited another week. Then I dialed back. He answered on the second ring. Mire, he said. Just that. There was silence. Then, finally, he spoke again. His voice was lower than I remembered. Less controlled. I never thought you'd really leave. I didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explanation. It was just honest. He continued. You were better than me. I couldn't admit it. So I tried to take it back. I still didn't speak. I didn't trust my voice. I wanted you to stay small. Not because you couldn't grow, but because I couldn't keep up. It was the most vulnerable I had ever heard him. Not dramatic. Just plain spoken. Like a man looking back on something he couldn't fix. But I wasn't ready to forgive him. I didn't respond to that call right away. Not the day after, not the week after. Because even though he'd finally admitted the truth, that he'd hampered me out of fear, not out of reason, it didn't rewrite the past. It didn't undo the years I spent waiting for approval that never came. It didn't undo the hurt, the humiliation, the sticky note on an empty desk after a decade of devotion. But it did give me something I hadn't realized I needed: confirmation. Not closure, not forgiveness. Just confirmation that I hadn't imagined it. That the betrayal was real. That I wasn't crazy for thinking I had earned something that was mine. I moved on. Or at least, I kept building forward. 6 months after that call, LYNQ was thriving. We had offices in 4 states, a tech partnership with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and were being courted by 2 international investors interested in our freight optimization model. The industry had begun calling us the next-gen standard for clean logistics in underserved regions. That's when the National Freight Expo reached out to me. They wanted me to deliver the keynote address. The event was being held in Chicago. Hundreds of companies would be represented. The entire supply chain media world would be there. McLaren was sponsoring the tech pavilion. Sutton Logistics was still a top-tier exhibitor. And my name? It was printed on the agenda. Keynote speaker, Mireille Sutton, CEO, LYNQ Freight Technologies. I agreed. I walked into that hotel ballroom with my head high and my team beside me. I wore a simple navy suit, hair pulled back, no flair. I didn't need it. The power was in the story, and everyone already knew it. I didn't glance over at the Sutton booth as I passed it. But I did hear the silence that followed. People turned their heads. I caught a few expressions, some surprised, some sheepish, some proud. The industry hadn't taken sides publicly, but privately? It had always been clear who they respected. I delivered a 40-minute keynote that focused on the future: real-time load distribution, autonomous transfer hubs, and reducing freight's carbon footprint in low-infrastructure areas. I kept it professional. Sharp. Optimistic. Not once did I mention Sutton Logistics. I didn't have to. Afterward, a small line formed. Industry reps, students, journalists. And then, him. He didn't get in line. Just stood off to the side. He waited until the crowd had thinned before approaching. My team noticed him and stiffened. I gave them a subtle wave, "It's fine." He walked up slowly, hands in his coat pockets, older than I remembered. Or maybe just smaller. "I'm surprised you didn't mention me," he said. I looked him in the eye. "Why would I?" He nodded. "Right." We stood there for a second. Just 2 professionals now. Not father and daughter. Just history and weight. "You did good," he said. "You made sure I had to." A pause. He nodded again. "Word is you're preparing a bid for the Midwest FedEx route." I smiled. "Word is correct." He smirked. "That was always mine." Was. He nodded one more time, like he accepted it. Or maybe just realized he couldn't stop it. Then came the final twist. That evening, at a closed investor panel, McLaren announced a full divestment from Sutton Logistics. They were exiting entirely. And transferring those resources directly into Lynch's expansion initiative. The room buzzed. It was a polite, surgical, corporate betrayal. But to me? It was poetic. The man who told me I was replaceable was now replaced. Not by revenge. Not by spite. But by competence. Vision. Clarity. The same things he had once feared in me. I saw him one last time, a month later, at a Minneapolis industry mixer. He was talking to someone I didn't know. When our eyes met across the room, he didn't look away this time. He raised his glass. Not in toast. In acknowledgement. And I raised mine back. Not in forgiveness. In victory. I left the event early, stepped out into the crisp Minnesota evening. The skyline was familiar. The streets I used to walk with him as a little girl now stretched in front of me, filled with opportunities one built myself. I wasn't anyone's daughter anymore. I was Mary Sutton. CEO. Builder. Leader. And this time I'd make damn sure no one would ever be able to write me out of the story again.